Chapter 17. Grand Central Station. 15 hours, 53 minutes, 39 seconds. 38. 37. The station had been old for a long time. It had started being old when Mr. Ford invented his assembly line and aircraft began to get large and quietly menacing. Then there were wars, terrible wars, and it got even older. It was a large, airy place, delicately toned, reflecting the simple-minded philosophies of the 19th century technocrats. The station became old as soon as technology became a dark and twisted thing, a thing to fear, a controller. And now it was very old indeed. The car wasn't doing too well. It was terminally ill, dying quickly of a compound fracture of the oil pan. It wobbled badly down the dirt road that led up to the rear of Grand Central Station. Grey-black smoke oozed thickly out from underneath. The gullied road was choked with high weeds. It ran beside the tracks that had once moved people and commerce down its veins and arteries, pumping the lifeblood of the city to the whole nation. Now the city was dead. Its veins deteriorated and collapsed. "He's down there," Hellman said, pointing to a burned-out train farther along the track. Small campfires dotted the area around the outside of the station, around the platforms. Light also flickered from within the still distant, crumbling testament to a world that no longer existed. Figures moved around the fires, silhouettes going about the business of survival. Plissken kept watching, looking for trouble. Hellman was still pointing. "He's in the third car, by the campfire." The train was just ahead. It was a hulking ruin, tons of dead metal, useless. Plissken eased up on it slowly and carefully. He heard sounds and turned his head. Engines, thundering engines. They watched past the weeds, past the outbuildings, to the streets beyond. In the distance, the Duke's caravan rumbled towards the station, homeward. "It's all right," Hellman said, but his voice didn't sound like it was all right. "Duke's gotta go the front way. He'll never beat us." Plissken grunted and looked at the man. "When you get in there," he said, "talk fast, understand?" The dirt road terminated in the crumbling platform. They bumped up on the cracked cement and spotted towards the distant fire. "What if they recognize the car?" Maggie asked as they closed on the dark figures who huddled around the fire. "Then I guess we're all out of luck." The snake smiled and shoved his rifle into Hellman's ribs. "Isn't that right, Harold?" Hellman just frowned at him. "Stop here," he said. Plissken had to floor the brakes with both feet to get the thing to stop, but stop it did, about 20 paces from the fire. The train loomed silently beside them, like the carcass of some monstrous prehistoric beast. "You know what to do," Plissken said softly, and slid down in the seat. Hellman just sat there, staring out the bullet-pocked windshield. "Let's get it over with," Maggie said from the back seat and opened her door. It got Hellman moving. He opened his door and they both got out of the car. The snake slid up in the seat just enough to peek out the windshield. 7 men stood staring at them around the campfire. This was the part he hated, trusting Hellman. Sliding across the seat, he quietly opened the door and eased out of the car on the train's side. He rolled along the ground using the car as a shield, and finally off the platform next to the train. He rolled under the thing, then began climbing a boxcar to get up above them. He moved quickly, the speed still controlling his tempo. Getting to the top of the car, he crept along its length towards the one that held the president. He made the first one, then bridged the gap to the second as quietly as he could. Below him, Hellman had made it to the campfire. "Hey," the man said, smiling broadly. "How's it going? How are you boys tonight?" A small one with chunky, compact features and a red and yellow polka-dotted bandana seemed to be in charge. He stepped out of the group around the fire. "What do you want, Brain?" he asked, and his tones were edged with suspicion. Hellman hesitated, his eyes drifting up to Plissken's form on top of the car. The snake held up his rifle so that the man could see its shadow in the darkness. He took a breath. "We're going inside to meet the Duke," he said finally. "He's on his way." The man stepped closer. "He never said nothing to us about it." Plissken started moving again, past the figures to the next car. "You know the Duke," Hellman said. "He doesn't talk much anyway. Sometimes you gotta guess what he's thinking." Plissken slipped between the cars, going in the door of the rusting passenger car that held the president. He slipped in quietly, moving through the long shadows. The president was in there, about halfway along in a seat. He was dirty, his clothes ripped and shredded. His face was waxen, drained of blood. A lantern lit him to yellow pallor. A cloth was wrapped around his hand, another around where a finger should have been, but wasn't. He was facing Plissken's direction. Beside him, facing away, was a gypsy with a hacksaw. He was trying to cut through the titanium chains of the cuffs that held the briefcase to the president's wrist. Another one, red-bearded and scarred, was down close to Plissken, watching out the glassless window at the exchange going on by the campfire. The one by the window chuckled low. "That Brain is a real pain in the ass. He's always sniffing around. Like a dog." Plissken moved, slipping out of the shadows. He hurried up behind the man at the window. He grabbed a hand over the man's mouth, the other on the back of his head. He twisted. "He comes up with the gas," the one on the handcuff said, not turning around. Plissken put his back into it, twisting for all he was worth. The man's neck snapped audibly, the tension in his body relaxing with the snap. He let the man drop to the seat, then turned to the other. The president's eyes were wide with horror. The other gypsy caught the expression. "What's wrong with you?" His instincts were quick, honed to jungle tension. The man turned, coming up with a crossbow as the snake dug into the holster, bringing out the metal spur that Rem had put in there. The man loosed the bow, the bolt plunging into Plissken's thigh. The pain knocked him back, coursing through him in pulsating waves. But somehow, through the agony that shook him, he let fly the spur. It hit the man on the forehead with a squishing sound. He backed away, falling against the seats. He was going for the door. He tried to yell, to call for help, but his words were choked off by mouthfuls of blood. Plissken watched as the man got closer to the far door, pulling himself along the seats. Getting within reach of the handle, he went to turn it, but he couldn't find the strength. He sat down on the last seat to rest, and promptly died. Plissken let himself ease back on a seat for just a second. He could barely think through the pain, but he didn't need a lot of thought. Straightening, he began limping towards the president, channeling all his thoughts into freeing the man. Harker's eyes were still wide, his mouth silently working like the gypsies with the hole in his head. Plissken reached him, his strength draining out of him like lube out of a grease gun. Suddenly inept fingers began tugging on the ropes that held the man. "Are you from the outside?" Harker whispered. "Stop shaking," Plissken rasped as the knots kept jiggling out of his grasp. "I can't," the man moaned feebly. "Oh God, who are you?" "Hauk sent me in," the snake told him, then realized that the man probably had no idea who Hauk was. He wished he didn't. "We've got to move fast." The knots were coming loose under his fingers, the ropes falling away. "Oh, I'll move fast," the president said, breathing raggedly, excitedly. "You're goddamn right I'll move fast." Then Snake Plissken understood how John Harker got to be president of the United States and its possessions. The ropes loosened all around. The president was up, pulling them off himself. "Come on, let's go," Plissken snapped, and they hurried through the car, climbing out the side opposite the fires. His legs were completely numb, a useless weight dragging him down. The blood was flowing freely from the wound, running back down the shaft of the arrow, dripping in globs onto the ground. 2 cars farther down, by the engine, Hellman and Maggie stepped out on the same side of the train. Hellman waved quickly. They started moving towards the distant figures. If the snake hadn't been concentrating so hard on just moving, he might have noticed that Hellman jumped awfully quick back into the darkness after waving. They got 1 car away from the engine when the first gypsy jumped on them from the opening. Plissken went down with the man, and as his eye jerked skyward, he saw more of them leaping at him from the top of the train. The president yelled, swinging out with his briefcase to take one of them down with a groin shot. But it was no use. They were everywhere, grabbing and punching. And through it all, the only thing he could think about was Hellman. Hellman dead. Hellman with a railroad spike driven to the hilt between his eyes. Hellman on fire. Hellman without a head. They banged on him, but he was removed from the pain. He had maxed out on pain, OD'd on it, and like too much of any drug, it left him numb and sedentary. Through the haze, he saw his own rifle leveled at his head, and he laughed to think that Hauk would be deprived of the pleasure of blowing up his insides. He figured that the bombs would go off anyway, doing their duty, desecrating the remains of already lifeless meat. Hands were grabbing at his holster, pulling it off him. "Hold it!" A voice, strong with authority. Figures moved away from the snake. The black man with the fedora strode over to him, stopping only long enough to give Hellman a sidelong glance. "Kill him quick," Hellman whispered. "He's slippery." The man ignored him and walked on. Plissken opened his eye wide to stare his hatred to the man, a feeling they could share. There was a sound, a creak. The Duke turned to it. The president was trying to slip away between the cars. "Don't move, craphead," the Duke said, then immediately turned his attention back to the snake. They stared at one another. "Who are you?" the big man asked. The snake ignored him. If he was going to die, he would do it as he lived, in total defiance. The Duke pursed his lips and put his hand on the arrow in Plissken's leg. He pushed it in farther. The fire again shot through Plissken's brain, threatening to short-circuit him into unconsciousness. "He's Snake Plissken," Hellman said. "From the outside. He had a gun, Duke. There was nothing I could do." Plissken turned for one more look at Hellman. Maggie stood behind him. She was slipping him something that he tucked under his coat. The Duke released the arrow and stood up full, running fingertips lightly across the scars that gouged his face like planting furrows. "Snake Plissken," he said from far away. "Well, I've heard of you." He walked up to straddle Plissken's form. A tire tool was in his hand. He smiled through crooked teeth, and the snake watched the metal bar coming towards him in slow motion. It came down on his head, but he never felt it. He just drifted away into the black, gas-jumping night. The last thing he heard before the dark mist came to wrap him up in taffy-like dreams was the Duke's voice echoing from another world somewhere. "I heard you were dead."